There are moments in law enforcement that split time in two, moments when a single action, one command, one pull of a trigger, defines not only the man who gives it, but the system that allows it. It was supposed to be an ordinary morning at Jefferson International Airport. Passengers lining up for flights, security scanning bags, the low hum of announcements echoing through the halls, but behind the calm, tension was about to erupt in a way no one could have imagined.
Officer Daniel Cross was on his first year of duty, a quiet, disciplined rookie with a soldier's posture and a believer's heart. He wasn't loud, he wasn't ambitious, but he carried something far rarer in the precinct: integrity. He had joined the force to serve, not to dominate, to protect, not to intimidate. But in a department led by Captain Rourke, such ideals were treated like weakness.
Rourke was the kind of man who mistook fear for respect. His reputation stretched across the city, the Iron Captain, unchallenged, uncorrected, and utterly unaccountable. His officers followed orders not out of loyalty, but out of survival. And so, when the call came in about a non-compliant suspect at the airport checkpoint, Rourke saw it as another stage to display control.
The suspect was Major Leon Briggs, a decorated Army veteran recently returned from overseas. He wore plain clothes, but his ID bore military credentials. The scanner had flagged his bag for a false positive, nothing more than a routine check. But when Rourke arrived, something shifted. His voice sharpened, his posture stiffened. "Step back and show me your hands," he barked. Briggs calmly replied, "Officer, I'm cooperating. My ID is right here." The exchange drew attention. Passengers froze. Security cameras turned.
Cross felt a storm rising inside him, a clash between obedience and conscience. He saw the fear in Briggs's eyes, not fear of arrest, but of disbelief that this was happening again, that the uniform he once saluted now pointed a gun at him. And then came the moment that would echo across two institutions: one shot, one order, one irreversible mistake. Captain Rourke's finger tightened, the gun fired. Major Briggs fell to the ground, blood blooming through his shirt, and the silence that followed was louder than the gunshot itself.
For 3 full seconds, no one moved. No breath, no sound, no order. Rourke's face went pale. His gun trembled slightly, still raised, as if his body hadn't caught up to the reality of what he'd done. Officer Cross rushed forward, heart pounding. He dropped to his knees beside Briggs, applying pressure to the wound. The veteran's voice was faint but steady, like a man used to commanding through chaos. "Your camera. It's on." Cross nodded, confused. Briggs coughed, his words heavy with pain but precise. "Then don't stop recording, no matter what happens next." Within moments, airport security tried to take over, but Cross refused to deactivate his bodycam. He knew what it had captured: the escalation, the warnings ignored, the command unprovoked.
By the time paramedics arrived, the footage was already uploading to the precinct's network, and somewhere across town, a military base received a copy, automatic, encrypted, and undeniable. Minutes later, the glass doors of the terminal slid open again, but this time it wasn't commuters walking through, it was the military police. Their boots hit the tile in perfect rhythm. Their expressions were stone. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. Captain Rourke turned, ready to shout authority, but what stood before him was a different kind of authority, one built on discipline, truth, and duty. The next 48 hours would become one of the most scrutinized periods in local law enforcement history. The airport footage spread across social media like wildfire. Army major shot by police captain. The public outcry was immediate, but the real shock came when the military's official statement dropped. An act against one of our own will be met with full cooperation and full accountability. Captain Rourke was suspended within hours. His badge, once a symbol of unchallenged power, was removed in front of his own precinct. For the first time in his career, he faced an investigation he couldn't control. And it was Officer Daniel Cross who had unknowingly lit the fuse. Inside the precinct, tension turned to division. Some officers whispered that Cross had betrayed the code of silence. Others called him the only one brave enough to honor it. But the story didn't end there. Major Briggs survived after a long surgery. When reporters asked him what he wanted in return for justice, his answer disarmed everyone. "I don't want revenge. I want reform." That one sentence reframed the entire incident. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about restoration. Cross visited Briggs weeks later in the hospital. The old soldier smiled weakly and said, "You did right, son. You kept your oath when your superior broke his." The young officer didn't know how to respond. He had spent nights replaying the moment in his head, wondering if he could have stopped it sooner. But Briggs's calm eyes silenced that guilt. "Truth," the major said, "always demands a cost. You just paid yours with courage."
In the months that followed, the Jefferson Police Department changed. Body cameras became non-negotiable. De-escalation training was doubled. Supervisory evaluations were reviewed by third-party auditors. The state legislature even cited the Briggs incident in its reform bill, emphasizing accountability and cross-agency transparency. But beyond politics, something deeper shifted. Officers began to look at their badges differently, not as shields of authority, but as mirrors of accountability.
Years later, the incident was still spoken of, not as a scandal, but as a parable. At the police academy, recruits studied the case as part of ethics training. The instructor would dim the lights, play the body cam footage, and let silence do the teaching. "Right here," he'd say, pausing the video at the exact frame where Cross refused to lower his camera. "This is the moment a rookie became a symbol, not because he disobeyed a superior, but because he obeyed the truth." The story spread beyond Jefferson. It reached departments in other states, shared in seminars, quoted in manuals, whispered in roll calls. It became known simply as the airport lesson.
Captain Rourke's name faded into obscurity, stripped of rank, reputation, and respect. He moved away quietly, unable to outrun the shadow of his own decisions. But Officer Cross, he rose, not in rank, but in reverence. His peers began calling him the Quiet Compass. When he finally retired, the Academy invited him to give one last lecture. The hall was packed with young cadets, veterans, and commanders. The air was heavy with anticipation. Cross stepped to the podium, weathered but steady, his voice low yet commanding. "Every badge shines the same under the sun," he began, "but it reflects differently in the dark." He let that sink in before continuing.
You'll face moments where orders and conscience collide. When that day comes, and it will, remember this. Your oath isn't to a man, it's to the law. It's to the people, it's to the truth.
He paused again, scanning the crowd of silent faces. And if you ever have to choose between protecting your career and protecting what's right, choose what lets you sleep at night. The room stood in silence for a long, sacred moment before erupting into applause. Outside, the Academy's wall displayed a new inscription beneath the department's emblem. Justice doesn't wear a uniform. It wears courage.
This has been another true moral fable from States of Justice, where integrity stands taller than power, and every story reminds us that justice, though delayed, is never denied. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories from States of Justice.